Chapter 8, Entrepreneurship. Before we talk about entrepreneurship, we've talked about the business formats and the importance of small business to the United States economy. The Small Business Association is a federally sponsored source of information for small business owners. They have locations located throughout the country. There's a big one in Boston near the Boston Garden on Causeway Street, but you can get most of the information that you need online. If you're a member of the SBA or you seek information from them, they do have retired professionals who have knowledge about how to run a business, and they can give you some tips and pointers about what types of things you should be aware of. To be a part of the SBA and other contracting programs, you have to be a for-profit business, independently owned and operated. Again, we're looking at small businesses. We are talking largely about sole proprietorships and partnerships and even some smaller corporations. We're just not talking about a company that is a subsidiary of another major company. They should be physically located within the United States, and they're not a market-dominant competitor. Looking at small businesses in the economy, we mentioned this a little bit before when we talked about business formats, but small businesses really are the things that drive the economics of the United States. Almost 100% of all businesses are small businesses. A very small fraction are these large firms. Now, what I mean by small business, you can still be a corporation and be a small business. It's really defined by whether or not you have at least 500 employees or more. And the vast majority of companies within the United States have enough employees or a small enough number of employees to be considered small businesses. Small businesses are more innovative typically than large companies. They are creating jobs at a greater rate. About 50% of all new jobs do come from small businesses. They employ almost half of all employees in the United States. And because they are innovative, given their small size and their ability to focus on independent research and come up with new ideas to try to find a market niche for them to operate within, they do tend to hire more tech people, a lot of tech workers in terms of scientists, programmers for computers, and engineers. Small firms produce 16 times as many patents. Now, if you remember, a patent is a government protection for an idea. If you come up with a new process, a new computer chip, a new way of doing something, a new piece of equipment, you can get a patent, and the smaller firms produce far more than the larger firms. Larger firms tend to make money doing what they've always done. There's less of an incentive for these bigger established firms to continually create new ideas to become more competitive. Smaller firms, by contrast, have to come up with new ways to compete, and that usually relies on innovation. So they are much more likely to come up with newer and better ideas about how to accomplish certain objectives that people have a demand for. Small firms represent about 42% of the US payroll. So, like we talked about before, even though corporations make the most amount of revenue, they are the minority of the formats of business. Because the corporations can be so large, even though they only represent a small fraction of businesses in the United States, they do have 42% of the payroll because some of these firms, like Walmart, could have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of employees, which skew the data. Small businesses are predicated on the entrepreneur, someone who's willing to set up a business and take the risk of doing so. An entrepreneur is somebody who typically sees the opportunity to do something, some type of unmet need in the market, and wanted to come up with a way to provide a current service and make money. Small businesses usually can't compete with places like Walmart or Target, but Walmart and Target don't do everything within their sphere of retail. If you are, for example, a recent immigrant and you know that there's an immigrant population where you live and they are seeking products and services that were something that they would be familiar with from their home market that you can't get at a Walmart or a Target, if there are people willing to get these goods and services and you have a way to provide it to them, then there's an opportunity for you to make money. So you wouldn't be competing directly with Walmart, but you would be competing with what the bigger players like a Walmart or a Target don't satisfy in terms of demand of the local population. Common traits of entrepreneurs are people who come up with ideas. They're driven to succeed. They don't mind working hard. As we said, small businesses and sole proprietorships do require a lot of work because you're pretty much on your own. You can't rely on a lot of other people, so you have to be driven to be able to do what's necessary on your own or with a small number of people that you can be partnering with. Entrepreneurs typically have good people skills, good communication skills. Oftentimes, when you're trying to start a new business, you have to convince people why your product or your service is worth taking a risk, worth investing money, worth coming to work for you. and worth to the consumers to purchase your good or service. So you have to be able to talk to people, not to schmooze them or lie to them or do some shady marketing, but to be able to communicate the information that is necessary for them to make a decision about whether or not to engage with you. They typically have a pretty organized work style. They're able to take care of what's necessary. That's tied to drive as well. They have to be financially savvy, know how money works, know how to get money, know how to make money work for them in the most efficient and economical way. Oftentimes, people who are successful entrepreneurs have an entrepreneurial background, which means they've already tried to be an entrepreneur previously and failed. A lot of the biggest success stories today are people who failed the first, second, third, or fifth time that they went out and tried to do some type of enterprise. It's that stick-to-itiveness or persistence that is sometimes what sets apart entrepreneurs from other people. There are a lot of one-time entrepreneurs who then try something and they fail and then they just go get a job and get a paycheck. Those are not what you would call entrepreneurs, at least not in the long term, because giving it a shot once is not necessarily what's going to make a success. A lot of times you need to try to do some work. Maybe it doesn't play out the way you would hope. You learn from your mistakes in the past and you're able to apply them in the future so that you have a better opportunity to succeed. According to the text, there's four types of entrepreneurs: the builder, somebody who wants to build up something very quickly, and they try to build up the infrastructure, getting the office, getting the materials out there, getting everything done. The opportunist looks at finance and will always be looking to make a money-making opportunity. The specialists are people who actually know something or a lot about something in one area that gives them a competitive advantage over others, and they use their expertise to be able to create some type of good or service that other people have in demand. And the innovator are the people who come up with new ways of doing things, new things that didn't exist, kinds of products that you didn't even know you need until they were invented. They're not necessarily driven by money, but they are driven by coming up with the next best thing. It's hard to put people in a box of one of these four. Typically, a successful entrepreneur will have a little bit of all four of these categories. So it's interesting to make these categories, but the minute you do and you try to put people in a box, typically they may not fit. But it's a good way to look at some of the characteristics that are required to be successful. Some well-known entrepreneurs, if you have a Hewlett-Packard printer at home or like me, a Hewlett-Packard laptop, Hewlett-Packard is named after Bill Hewlett and David Packard, who had a small business partnership, and they eventually turned it into a multi-billion dollar conglomerate that's known around the globe. Walt Disney was an entrepreneur. He started his own company drawing cartoons, and now it's Disney. Starbucks was started by Howard Schultz. It was only a few stores that he had in the beginning, and then he became incorporated, and they franchised out across the world. Amazon famously was established by Jeff Bezos, who set up an online bookstore. He then used this idea of selling books and CDs to get a customer base. Once you become a member of Amazon, then he used that platform that he developed for books and CDs and movies to sell anything, and it became an online marketplace. Michael Dell for Dell Computers, Bill Gates from Microsoft, Steve Jobs and Apple, they literally started in a garage somewhere putting together their own handmade personal computers. Walmart is named after the Walton family, Sam Walton. Google was a couple of graduate students who came up with a better search engine that turned into what it is today with Chrome and YouTube and all the other assets that it has. Ben and Jerry is named after Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield. Henry Ford created Ford Motors. And Thomas Edison, a famous inventor from over 100 years ago, came up with General Electric. He is credited with inventing the light bulb, and one of the first things that General Electric did was make electrical products like light bulbs. General Electric makes aircraft engines, refrigerators, they make all kinds of things today. So some of these companies can start off very small and then they can grow and expand into something that we know today as these huge corporations. But a lot of them had rather humble beginnings. So looking at firms by employment size, typically we're talking about under 500 employees. If you're 500 employees or greater, then you're considered to be a large firm. We're talking about small businesses. And as we said, 99.7% of all businesses are, in fact, less than 500 people. So there's about 18,000 firms in the United States that are over 500. These are your larger corporations typically. These are the Walmarts, the General Electric, the General Motors, et cetera. 100 to 499 employees, that's about 1.5% of all firms. 20 to 100, it's about a half a million firms. And 90% almost of all companies are just 0 to 20, meaning that 0, obviously somebody has to work there. We're talking about the owner. You could be a truly sole proprietor and just run it by yourself. But if you have employees, you could have either no employees for your sole proprietor, or you could hire up to 19 people. 90% roughly of all firms in the United States are less than 20 people. Small business innovation, some of the things that came from small businesses, the airplane was invented. It's credited in America, at least, to the Wright brothers, who owned a bicycle shop, and they became interested in flight and creating internal combustion engines. They started making bicycles with motors on them, and then they converted their skill at making bicycles to building frames for aircraft. The heart valve was invented by a doctor who did some research on his own, fiber optic examining equipment, soft contact lenses, the personal computer, like we mentioned with Steve Jobs. Even the zipper. I mean, if you think about some of the coolest inventions of all time, prior to the zipper, if you wanted to put on your pants, you had to button it up all the way up and down. Everything was buttons or ties. The zipper, somebody sat there and came up with this great idea, and it's a patented idea that is off patent by now, I'm sure. But that was invented by probably a tailor or someone that had some idea that there has to be a simpler way to put my clothes on than buttoning and tying 100 things. The reasons to be an entrepreneur, there's a few things we'll cover. Opportunity to make an impact, to live by your own rules. Any small business owner has got some entrepreneurial spirit. The idea of running your own business and not having to answer to other people is very attractive to some people. You are potentially into an elite group of leaders and doers, and you have the great potential for expansion. You don't have to wait to be selected for a job. You run your own company. You've chosen yourself essentially to go into business. If you perform well, that's really all that's going to be measured. If you perform well and you can make money, then you can be a successful entrepreneur rather than having doors closed when you're trying to find a job because you don't have the proper training, contacts, or degrees. You may have some freedom from discrimination because you don't have to rely on anybody else to hire you. You're doing it yourself. It does say relative freedom from discrimination because discrimination always will exist to some degree. And the fact that you are running your own business doesn't mean that you won't face discrimination in that role, but you may have more opportunity afforded to you as the owner of a business if that's a problem. There is a sense of satisfaction and even a thrill to run your own company and face the challenges of growth. You have pretty much unlimited upside. Like we said, the Wright brothers invented the airplane, and now Boeing and McDonnell Douglas and all these other companies are playing with that invention and making billions of dollars. There's no growth ceiling. To be reasonable, though, there's probably some barriers and some limitations, but technically, if you are qualified and you have the drive to do so, you really don't have any cap on your potential to expand your company and make a big impact. You have to be willing to learn a lot and grow a lot and adapt in order to be successful. A lot of companies, a lot of small businesses go out of business within the first 5 years. Those that don't either had probably failed previously and learned from their mistakes, or they're able to stick through the hard times and figure out how to be successful. You can work with new ideas, new technologies. You can get recognition for being a leader in your field rather than just another member of an employee staff. You can build something for your future generations. A lot of companies involve the families. You have your kids working for you. Hopefully, you don't cater to your kids, you make them earn it because a lot of times kids take over companies and run them into the ground. So it is a good opportunity to create something for other people, provided that it's not going to be just a gift, that they have to earn it as well in order to be successful. You can also define success in your own terms. You don't have to be a billionaire. As long as you're able to pay the rent and do what is successful for you, then you are a success. The advantages of small business ownership, you do have that independence and flexibility that we've discussed previously when comparing sole proprietorships to corporations, for example. You do get the benefits because you get to keep most of the stuff, most of the profits. You get to take the credit. You have the freedom to choose how your business is going to operate, what your hours are going to be, how much time you want to dedicate to it. The disadvantages are pretty much the flip side of all of that. You are in charge of everything, and that comes with a lot of responsibility. So whenever there's a problem, it's up to you to fix it. It does cost money to invest into a company, and when you're doing a small business, for example, a partnership or a sole proprietorship, and not a limited liability company or a corporation or other vehicle that provides limited liability, you are risking your own wealth and your own time and your own family and friends' money as well. So whatever capital you bring into the game, it's yours. Ideally, there's that old saying, other people's money. If you can use other people's money, then it's the risk is to them and not to you, but you still have a reputation that you have to protect. And if you fail to bring a return on somebody who invested in your idea, you're not going to have a good time trying to get investors in the future. There's no guarantee of a regular paycheck. In fact, at the beginning, you may not be getting paid hardly anything at all. You don't have any health care. You don't have any vacation time. There's nothing given to you by your employer as a benefit, only what you can give yourself and still manage to run the company. You're responsible for setting and managing expectations. Sometimes, if you don't have a lot of experience, that's a difficult thing to do because you may have unreasonable expectations. You're responsible for business development, planning, HR, IT, everything is basically what you're going to have to be a jack of all trades, as they say. And as noted, 50% of small businesses do fail within 5 years. That doesn't mean that all entrepreneurs who fail disappear. Some of them do, but some of them just get right back at it with another idea. Undercapitalization can be a big problem because if you're setting up your own business and you have limited money to invest, you get the best idea in the world, but if you don't have enough money to bring it to fruition, it's going to be a problem. It also is problematic when you have to hire people to work for you. If you're not bringing in a lot of revenue because it's a new business, how are you going to hire people to help you out? You may have to be creative, bring in partners, bring in silent partners, offer percentages of profit sharing or something to be able to attract qualified people to help you get over the hump, so to speak, at the beginning when things are going to be a little bit more unpredictable. Some places fail, some business ventures fail because of the inability to come up with a business concept. You may have a half-baked idea, but it needs to be fully baked in order for you to be able to pull it off. And you have to have the wherewithal and skill set to be able to put it into reality. You may have come up with something that you think is a great idea, but if people don't want to buy something, it's not going to matter. If there's no demand for something, you could come up with what you think is a great idea, but if nobody wants it, then you're not going to be able to sell it. I've bought a few houses over the last few years, and I've walked in and people were asking $800,000 for a house that I think is $500,000. I even went to Craigslist just for a garage sale, and somebody was selling a rug, and they said, I paid $300 for this rug, and I offered them 40, and they were offended. And I said, has anybody else offered to buy this rug? And they said, no. I said, your advertisement said that you're moving out tomorrow. You have to move this rug, or you're going to have to take it with you. Whatever something is worth is what other people are willing to pay. It doesn't matter what you think. This person could think that their house is worth $800,000, and if somebody's willing to buy it, then congratulations, it was worth $800,000. But if you're pricing something at $800,000 and people are only going to pay 500, or you're pricing something like a $300 rug and there's nobody there to buy it, it's not worth $300. It's worth whatever the market says it is. And if you don't do a good job of understanding what the market is willing to pay for a particular product, good or service, then you're not going to be performing at a very high level because your idea may not be marketable at all. The lack of product, service, or competitive differentiation, whatever it is that you're offering, it has to be unique, either because it provides something that other products and services don't provide, or it's cheaper, or it's cooler. It's got to be something different. If you're offering the same thing that's already in the market and it's already established, and you're going to compete against somebody who's been in the market for years, good luck. You need to come in with something that's going to get people's attention. If you're just doing the same old thing, people will probably just stick to the established brands that are already out there. Another reason the companies fail is the managers, the owners don't have a really good awareness of how things are changing, how to respond to trends, how to create product changes or service changes that adapt to the needs of the people that are creating the demand. You have to stay in tune with what technology changes are happening, whether any regulatory or laws have changed, however things are playing out geopolitically and environmentally all over the world, potentially, depending on who your market is. And you have to look at other competitors to figure out what they're doing to be able to get a competitive advantage over you so that you can respond and remain competitive yourself. Some people become dependent on a single customer. I've known people that have become consultants and they get one or two big contracts, and then they just don't really spend the time to go out and harvest and create new clients. And when those clients potentially drop them to go somewhere else, they're out of business. We already mentioned lack of investment capital. A lot of people also have the inability to manage growth. They want to expand, but they're not sure how to do it. They don't hire people that they trust to be able to delegate some of the duties to these other people. They're so used to running the business themselves that they try to do everything. And when you get to a certain size, there's only so much one person can do. So you're going to have to bring in other people that can help you do the things that you're trying to do. You may need to bring in experts about how to expand, how to do direct investment, how to do franchises. You may need to bring in experts to help you do that. And if you don't, and you're not able to do it yourself, it's going to be difficult to be able to pull off growth and do it in a way that's going to be sustainable. Other places fail because they simply don't make enough money. They have what's known as a cash flow problem. If you've got $50,000 in the bank and you start business and you're not bringing in any money and you have $10,000 a month in expenses, you're going to last 5 months before you're going to go broke. So if you don't have cash flow coming in enough to pay off your debt, or at least you don't have enough in reserves to get by until you start bringing in enough revenue to pay off your expenses, then that could be quite problematic for you. Just because you're starting a business doesn't mean that you're necessarily a good manager. You may not know how to manage people or processes because you don't have enough experience. That can be a problem, and that can be tied directly to failure. Some people also have a heightened sense of what they're capable of doing. They may overestimate the capacity or their knowledge. They may not even know enough about what they are supposedly aware of or what they're knowledgeable about to know how little they actually know. So you have to be able to do the professional development, either learning on your own or taking classes or teaming up with other people that have a good grip and a good grasp on what's happening. So when you want to start a business, you have to do a self-assessment. What are you good at? Are you capable of doing these things? Do you need to partner up with other people who have complementary capabilities? Do you have a good idea? Is this something that people actually want? Is it something that people actually need? Is it different than what other people are able to provide? Make sure that whatever it is that you're doing doesn't conflict with whatever your interests are. If you want to run a business that does one thing, do a business that does that. If you create a business and it morphs into something else, your heart may not really be in it. So ask yourself at the beginning, do you want to start a business? Why do you want to start a business? And then you have to answer all the questions: who, what, when, where, how, and why. If you can answer all those questions, then you can start developing a business plan. The steps to developing a business plan: you have to do some research, come up with ideas. If you come up with an idea that works, that you think is plausible, take a look at the market and find out if anybody's already doing it. You may have come up with a great idea that you didn't know already existed. And if that's the case, then that's a problem. You're going to have to go back to the drawing board. You're going to come up with a business plan. You're going to look at your analysis and try to figure out how to answer all those questions: who, what, when, where, how, and why. Try to figure out how to get the money to do it. Your business plan, at least the executive summary of your business plan and some of the spreadsheets for finance, that's going to be very important to get people to invest. You're going to have to tell them what your idea is, why it's going to work, how much money it's going to take, and how much money you anticipate making so that they could get a return on their investment. If you can't explain that to people at the outset, they're not going to invest in your company. If you can't get your customers to believe what it is that you're selling, they're not going to buy it. Make sure you do all of that first. Planning is often half the battle, and people can dedicate weeks, months, or even years to getting things planned out correctly so that when you actually have to put it into action, you're just following a game plan that you've already developed instead of making it up as you go. You need to select a location. It could be virtual, or you could have a marketplace where you need a brick and mortar business where people walk in and you have a warehouse or something like that. If you have a target market that people are going to buy it and you're going to have a physical location, it should be located where those people are. They always say the joke about businesses regarding a location in real estate: there's three main rules: location, location, location. If you're in a bad location and nobody's going to come to buy your stuff, it doesn't matter how great your abilities are. It doesn't matter how great your product is if you can't get people to walk in your door. So make sure that you're situated in the proper location. Figure out what the best business structure is. Do you need limited liability? Do you want to have a partner? Are you okay being a sole proprietor? Any of the other flavors: LLCs, LLPs, limited partners, general partners. You have to figure out what makes the most amount of sense for that and incorporate that into the business plan. You also need to come up with a name. You could go to the U.S. Patent and Trade Office to find out if that name has been taken. You need to register your business. If you're a sole proprietor or a partnership, you need to go to the city, like I showed you in class in those supplemental slides from chapter 7. You need to also get federal and state tax IDs, particularly if you have an LLC or a corporation, something that creates a separate entity. And you will need to get an employee ID number in order to pay taxes, hire employees, and get a bank account separate from your personal bank account if you want to open a bank account in the name of the business. You have to get whatever state licenses and permits you have to do. If you're running a restaurant, you have to make sure your restaurant has been approved by the local Board of Health. If you're an accountant, you need to get passage of whatever test you need to take. I'm a lawyer, I had to pass the bar exam. So there are other things that you need to do so that the business that you're running is legally operating. Even if you don't have a separate entity, it does make sense to maybe open up a separate bank account that just handles the accounts and business transactions for that business. If you're a sole proprietor, you can have your personal bank account. You can open up a bank account for the company. It just makes it easier to do your accounting at the end of the year, all of your money coming in, all of your money going out, all of your cash flows. Both of your bank accounts, including your personal bank account, may be subject to liability in a sole proprietorship situation. But for ease of keeping everything separate, it sometimes does make sense to open a business bank account as well. Some of the factors to consider, I'm not going to go through this here, but make sure you understand by looking at this slide. What is a sole proprietorship? Who owns it? What is your level of liability and how do you pay taxes? If you're familiar with all of that, you'll do pretty well on the exam. And if you want to open your own business and you understand that these are the things that are important, it will help you choose whatever structure you want so that you may have a more successful business as you move forward in starting it up. The business plan typically consists of an executive summary. This is 2 or 3 pages of highlights, what the name of the company is, what you're going to do, how you're going to cater to the market, why you're going to be a success, how much money you think you're going to get, where you're going to operate. More detail comes in the main part of the business plan where you have the detailed description of the company, what the opportunity is, how you're going to do it. You don't want to necessarily give away all of your trade secrets, but you need to give enough so that if people are going to invest, they understand why this is a good idea. You want to do a market analysis, look at the particular product that you're marketing. Is there competition? Are there people that want to buy it? What is the price range? What is the target market? What type of trends are you looking at? Is it going to become more popular or less popular as time goes by? The organization and management, again, this is the legal structure. Are you going to have a partnership, sole proprietorship, etc.? If you're going to have a corporation, you have to do the bylaws, come up with the way that shares are going to be handled. Is it going to be publicly traded? Is it going to be a closed corporation? You're going to have to come up with an organizational design so you have a chain of command. Who reports to whom? Who's the boss? Are you going to have an accounting division? You're going to have a sales division? These are ideas for probably bigger companies, but right at the outset, if you have plans for growth, you could also detail that in your business plan and show what the organizational design will look like. Figure out what your service or product line is going to be, what makes you different, what is your niche, what is your particular area that you could exploit that other people aren't. Get any copyrights, any patents, any trademarks. Figure out how you're going to do your marketing and your sales. Getting customers to buy something from you does cost money, customer acquisition costs. If you get customers, you want to make sure that they're satisfied because it's a lot cheaper to keep recurring customers than it is to continually go out and get new customers. So whatever it is that you're doing, market it, get your customers, keep them satisfied, and then expand by bringing in new customers to your existing market base. You may need to figure out how to get money. So you may have to go to a bank, you may have to go to an angel investor or investment capital firm. Investment capital is just basically people with deep pockets that can throw money at these new startups that look like they have an opportunity to succeed. It's good because they have a lot of money to invest, and if you have a good idea, they may be willing to finance your operation. But it does not come without a cost. They're not going to give you money for free. Some people have actually taken money from investment capital firms only to find out that while they like the idea, they don't think that you're a very good manager and they fire you from your own firm and they take it over because they want to protect their investment and make sure they're going to make a profit. And that may include, depending on the agreement that you sign, their right to change out management, which in this case could be you. So you have to be careful about how you're going to be doing it. But in order to attract that type of investment, you have to be able to answer questions. People are going to want to know what you're going to do with their money, and you have to be able to tell them. Usually 6 months, 1 year, short-term investments, short-term prospectus about how the company is going to operate. You may want to expand that out to as long as 5 years, where you expect to be in 5 years, how things are going to be looking. Come up with some financial projections, again, looking forward, forecasting, looking into the future. Where are you going to be in 5 years? What type of returns are you expecting? And then you can have an appendix or multiple appendices that have all the spreadsheets with here's how much money's coming in, here's how much money's going out, here's what the projections look like. You can put all of that in there and refer to it, but you want to have the actual details in appendix so it's easier for people to read the actual business plan. If they want to get all the numbers, they're available. And that's it for chapter 8. Next week, we're going to do chapter 13 and 14, marketing.